Sisters and brothers, the time is upon us when, as responsible citizens, we must choose a government to manage our patrimony, thus ensuring that our Commonwealth is equitably distributed with priority on the poor. The timing of this vital component of our democratic process comes when the nation is battling the fourth wave of the coronavirus, caused largely in part by the Delta variant. The overarching question is why now? Why now when the healthcare systems, both public and private, are at their breaking point? Why now when so many are dying alone? Families are deprived of being with their loved ones and cannot properly mourn their dead. And religious rights are hijacked and trivialized. Why now? When the school year has just started and in-person learning is discouraged. Why now? When the economy is only now trying to rebound and the rhythm of work is gaining momentum. Whatever the reason or reasoning, clearly the political strategists have taken a page out of Prime Minister Andrew Holness's playbook, who called a snap election in Jamaica at the height of the coronavirus last year. Notwithstanding our tradition of unbroken democracy and legislative assembly since September 29, 1729, this election cycle has already seen its share of negative campaign ads, campaign smearing and counter-smearing, fake news, political attacks, and outright gutter politics. The unethical releasing of private documents to fan the flames of sensationalism and scandal do not speak to the maturity of our democracy and of our unwavering commitment to fair play. Yet there is a responsibility that every sober person registered to vote has. That is to wrestle painstakingly with the issues that affect our way of life. Blind loyalty to a political party is not only irresponsible, but immature, and most unhelpful to nation building. For we indeed have a nation to build, not just for the privileged few, but for all Bahamians, that intentionally transforms the life of the poor. Such was the message of the now governing party in the lead-up to the last general election, to prioritize the poor and to transform or change their condition. That message obviously resonated with the masses, for they were sent to Parliament with 35 seats, with the overwhelming support of the electorate and a blank check for better, for hope was alive in the expectations of many. However, it soon became apparent to honest observers, that like an orchestra with highly skilled musicians, the ability of the conductor to get that one quality sound never materialized. One only could hypothesize the reasons. Maybe it was because the notion of priority for the poor was not important for those in positions of influence. Maybe it was because of the amount of political novices thrust into positions of power and influence, who instead of learning became swollen with pride. Maybe it was because the conductor never knew who to trust, as many were subtly and overtly positioning themselves as an alternate leader. Maybe it was because of the lack of competence and or commitment to patriotism. Maybe it was because some were driven by greed and aggrandizement. Or just maybe it was because some never should be in the governance of a country, period. What is undeniable is that many quickly became disappointed with those overwhelmingly chosen to lead. The current government had to deal with the effects of Hurricane Dorian and the global pandemic of COVID-19 within the first 2 years of its administration. While it would be beyond crazy to lay blame at their feet for these catastrophic phenomena, it is reasonable to critique its management of these crises. It is hard to ignore the painful stories of those who felt that critical supplies did not reach them in a timely manner in the aftermath of Dorian. It is hard to ignore the frustration of those injured when stymied in their attempt to get urgent care. It is hard to ignore the indignity of corpses in trailers or the latest scene of mass burials. It is hard to ignore the impact of unnecessary bureaucracy experienced by those NGOs and foreign partners who were willing and ready to help our people once the all clear was given. It is hard to ignore unused supplies or alternate housing for a people used to a particular standard of living. It is hard to ignore not promoting an aggressive house repair program. It is hard to ignore photos of unrepaired houses 2 years removed from Dorian. It is hard to ignore the sobs of those whose loved ones are still missing or unaccounted for. It is hard to ignore the seeming cover-up of the true number of those who lost their lives. Our sisters and brothers in the Agapos and the eastern end of Grand Bahama deserve to be heard and to have their lives restored and not merely used for photo ops, but in a systematic and sustained way until normalcy is returned. Without question, the seeming power struggle within the committee that oversees the relief efforts did not help the people or reinforce the commitment of the government to do a good job by the people in a prompt manner. Either way, the verdict has yet to be delivered by the business community in Abaco specifically, whether or not the government did all in its power to assist in their rebuilding in a timely manner. For while concessions were given, the yearly revisiting of the same may not necessarily aid in long-term business planning. Most would agree that the cleanup effort was expedited in a timely manner, and the unpopular stance of shanty towns not being allowed to be rebuilt were positives in the rebuilding effort. However, updates have been few and far apart regarding those displaced and or forced to relocate to other islands. In light of the global pandemic and the medical emergency it created, governments around the world made decisions and took drastic measures to secure the health and well-being of its citizens and residents. While that was understandable, the expectation would be that each government tweaks its management in light of the lived realities of its people. In our case, it seemed that little to no attention was paid to our realities and our cultural sensibilities. The timing and implementation of weekend lockdowns seemingly did not take into consideration the plight of the poor or those living on the edge of poverty. Classism was also magnified in the areas where roadblocks were set up, and the chasm between the haves and the have-nots was clearly seen. The glaring disrespect for religious enterprise was a hard pill for many to swallow, as faith was seemingly spurned for science. The vital ministry of the Christian church was interrupted in an unapologetic manner, to the point where many, and in particular the aged, have refused to return to the courts of God's house. The latitude given to rumbas was surprisingly denied the church. Decisions to open and close seemed knee-jerk, and at times even spiteful, with little to no data justifying the same. Yet, when there was a sharp spike in cases after the opening of the airport in July of 2020, the administration seemed clueless in connecting the dots, but the blame was seemingly placed on the masses, who for the most part were doing their best to abide by the rules and the new protocols. In the midst of economic challenges, a travel visa was needed and had to be secured, with a fee attached, adding to the burden of the cost of testing. Seemingly little to no consideration was given to Bahamians needing to travel inter-island for emergency or familial reasons. It seemingly took longer than necessary for the government to find that place of balance in the management of health and wealth. The plight of small businesses that still had to meet financial obligations, though closed, seemed to have been minimized, and the category, many of them were in for reopening, only added to their financial woes. The financial avalanche experienced by businesses and those in their employ still have many buried in the mire of debt. Regrettably, some businesses have never reopened. The collateral damage to the educational system has yet to be quantified, although the national exam results show improvements all around. But do they reflect the number of students who could not take the exam for one reason or more? Does this erase the disadvantage of not rubbing shoulders with other students to enhance learning informally? What came to light in the initial stages of virtual school was the high number of students living in houses without basic amenities and the capability for internet and other services. It must be noted that the government spared no effort to partner with the service providers and civic organizations to meet the needs of students and to get a device in the hand of each student. The government must be credited with providing unemployment and benevolent benefits for those disenfranchised and financially strained, even though complaints mount regarding stalled payments or long waiting time for payments. Businesses were helped, but more creativity could have been done regarding concessions. Social services facilitated the legitimate needs of those in dire straits. Relief was sought for renters, homeowners, and those insured, disadvantaging landlords who still had to pay mortgages without getting monies in. No one was fired from the public service or any quasi-government corporation during the pandemic. Every effort was made to secure vaccines for those at risk firstly, and eventually for all who were inclined to take it. Partnership with NGOs to acquire hospital beds and makeshift spaces to meet the mounting needs of those afflicted by COVID-19. The 4.5-year mark, at a time when there is much hurt and loss, so much pain and sorrow, we are forced to divide ourselves instead of uniting as a people because of a snap general election. Now caution is seemingly thrown to the wind as parties' headquarters are alive and popping, and the campaign is in full swing. The financial strain of the past year seems to have been forgotten as parties litter the streets with signage, posters, and massive billboards. Could those finances not be used more constructively to help and alleviate the plight of the poor and the suffering? For it all seems an extravagant and unnecessary waste of resources in these economically challenged times. Since we must choose, consider these questions. Has the governing party kept its promise to prioritize and transform the condition of the poor? Has the governing party kept its promise to ensure the freedom of information? Has the governing party kept its promise to be transparent and to deal with corruption or the appearance of corruption within its ranks? Has the governing party implemented policies that empowered the masses, or have those policies enriched the already rich? Has the governing party exercised fiscal prudence and ensured that the national debt is serviced? How many of the high-profile cases brought by the government have been won? And what were the costs to the public treasury for those not won? Has the healthcare system been improved? How has the healthcare system been improved or impacted? And how has the human resources fared? How prudent and effective has the governing party been on the granting of citizenship? How transparent has the governing party been in the awarding of contracts and the use of funds earmarked for hurricane relief? How has the governing party created rapid response centers or warehouses strategically positioned throughout the islands for national and natural disasters? How fair has the governing party been with those in its employ, or has it exploited contract workers? How has it dealt with those entitled for back pay and or promotions? How sensitive has the governing party been to the seniors and to the disenfranchised? How has the governing party's sidewalk project been managed? How has the governing party managed Hurricane Dorian relief and rebuilding program? How has the governing party managed COVID-19 and its collateral damage? How has the governing party managed the economy of the country and its natural resources? How effective has the governing party been in its housing and home ownership programs? How has the middle class fared under this administration? How have family islands fared under this administration? How robust has the program of free education for the masses been? How effective has the governing party been in providing care for frontline workers and those mentally traumatized by Hurricane Dorian and COVID-19? How accessible has your member of parliament been? How has your community been positively impacted by his or her representation? How are your values reflected in the values of those vying for your vote? What does the introduction of 18 new candidates say about the governing party? Will the future be brighter with the now governing party at the helm? This election cycle has seen a myriad of parties and individuals vying for votes for a chance at governance. This speaks well of the maturing democracy, of our maturing democracy, as more and more persons take ownership of the destiny of our country. Therefore, each party, our individual, must be vetted and examined on its own merit. However, the official opposition has clearly done everything in its power to rebrand itself, offering in this election cycle 27 new candidates out of 39. It seemingly has intentionally distanced itself from those perceived to be carrying political baggage that would hinder its chances at recapturing the reins of governance. Its slogan, "A New Day," seemingly seeks to convey to all that the dark night of the past 4.5 years is about to be lifted. These questions should be considered regarding the official opposition. Does the leadership of the party or its slate of candidates bring any disqualifying or concerning baggage? Has the incumbent provided quality representation? Has the official opposition kept the governing party's feet to the fire for the common good? Has it offered, in light of two crises, substantive suggestions for the betterment of the nation? Is its promise to reduce VAT prudent, wise, or financially viable? Is its promise to end curfews prudent and informed by the realities on the ground? Is it in danger of also being crippled by political neophytes with 27 new candidates? How ethical is the memorandum of understanding or promised alliance between the opposition and unions? Is its agenda towards the poor sustainable or progressive? Is work being done to transform historically depressed and depraved communities into oases of life and opportunity? Are the policies promised to be implemented amenable to entrepreneurial enterprise and ownership among the masses? What plans are in place to reduce the national debt? How are business owners going to be assisted if minimum wage is increased? How feasible are the plans for renewable energy and food security? What investments will be made in the agriculture and fishing industries? Beyond slogans and printed material, the question is still how, H-O-W, are these promises and plans going to be facilitated? Can the official opposition really usher in a new day? At the risk of exhausting you, please note that the DNA with the slogan "Change That Makes Sense" is fielding 18 candidates, none of whom have ever been elected to the House of Assembly. The Coalition of Independents with its slogan "Change is Here" is fielding 33 candidates, none of whom have ever been elected to the House of Assembly. Please investigate the other parties with their field of candidates and also the independent candidates who are without ties to any political party. There is a growing complaint that we are being volleyed between two major political parties. If this is so, has the time come for us to send men and women to Parliament that share our values and are true patriots with no allegiance to the two major parties or any political party? For if the truth is to be told, we ought to be voting for the person who best embodies our values and who we feel can offer the kind of representation that will make us proud in the halls of Parliament. To childishly say the vote is between two leaders is to diminish and dilute the potency of true representation. Finally, as people of faith, in all our ways, we must acknowledge and open ourselves to the path that God directs. Therefore, let us pray for guidance in our decision-making and pledge to respect the results of our election. Further, we pray for the parliamentary registrar and those who work in that department, those who will work the various polling stations, for all of our law enforcement agents, those charged with ensuring electoral integrity, that God gives them grace to function in this climate of ideological suspicion. May God grant the spirit of mutual respect among those partial to the party of their choice, thus fully cognizant that we are still Bahamians, one people, united in love and service. May God's kingdom come. May God's will be done on earth as it is already done in heaven. Come, election